What it is, what it ain't, so boy Carlton with another video for anything, everything. Where I talk about anything I want and everything that comes to my mind. In today's video, we're going to be responding to a video posted by Jubilee about allowing minors to transition. And I think it's important we make videos like this because whenever there's only one person on the side doing all the talking, it gives them more of an opportunity to be more influential, right? So where there is truth, where there is facts, it should always be stated. We should not only be having conversations based on people's emotions and their feelings, because if we live a life just off of emotions and feelings and not by facts, the world would be chaos. Almost, it'll be just like a damn episode of The Purge. So go straight into it.
After each prompt. Transitioning has become a social media trend.
Absolutely agree. I mean, it is just skyrocketing the amount of children that you see falling into this, and we need to stop it.
Absolutely not. People said the same thing about people coming out being lesbian, gay, or bisexual as it got more normalized, as people became more accepting of like their children and things like that. They're like, everybody wants to be gay. Now social media is around, people my age, like we see other trans people, and being aware that that's something that's being accepted by other people makes you more comfortable with yourself and like comfortable with like internalizing that it's okay to be trans in public.
I think you're falling prey to the survivorship bias, which is just sort of you're overlooking all of the cases of people who either weren't able to come out because they weren't comfortable or safe to do so, or they either died due to suicide or other mental health reasons. But over time, if you look at left-handedness, that skyrocketed in a similar rate as people became more accepting to it.
I reject that, but
Let me ask you something. If that's the case, if more people are transitioning simply because it's more acceptable, then how can your side also say that there's a trans genocide happening? Those are completely opposite. No, I know you didn't, but liberals say that all the time. They're saying that there's a trans genocide for some reason. So I'm just curious as to how you would square that circle.
Can we define what the trans genocide, I guess, narrative is as raised by her?
I would like her to answer that because she's the one that brought it up.
Yeah, because so we hear people saying because legislation is being passed across the country that is banning minors from being able to transition, that automatically means that those children would commit suicide. And that is simply an abusive statement in and of itself.
Statistically, a lot of minors who aren't able to transition who would like to do end up.
Why don't we have this?
That is the dumbest statement. Lord have mercy. How can you compute that someone ended their life because they weren't able to transition when the suicide rates actually go up after they transition because they realize that transitioning is not what's going to save their lives? That at the end of the day, it's a mental health disorder, which is why they call it gender dysphoria. There's nothing wrong with the outside. There's nothing wrong with the outside. You're not even able to accept yourself. So you alter yourself and then you realize you're still not able to accept yourself because it's a mental thing going on. But yes, the question is, has transitioning become a social media trend? And yes, the hell it has. Because there's a lot of, you know how I go on social media and a lot of people are giving you diagnosis and things like that without having all of the facts. And now whenever somebody go on social media and the second they realize that they're a boy and they like pink and that somebody's on social media telling them like, oh yeah, you might be a girl. These people are getting influenced like that. So yes, the hell it has. Transitioning has become a social media trend.
Why didn't we have the same suicide rates in the past if that was the case?
How could we have known that the people who were committing suicide were transgender if they didn't feel safe to come out?
When you look at like members of each generation that identify as LGBTQ or in that community, it's like less than 2%. And then for some reason, as soon as we get to Generation Z, it's 20%. Now, some of you may argue, okay, this is just because it's more open, it's more accepting now, everyone, it's okay to be that. But then in the same beat, you guys will say that if you don't accept them, they're more likely to commit suicide or something. But it kind of sounds like a double-edged sword.
So that didn't sound double-edged to me. It sounded pretty accurate. Like if you're not accepting of somebody, they're more likely to be self-hating. Like if you...
Bro, That goes to show you just how, I don't want to say the wrong word. It goes to show you just how easily influenced someone is. Imagine I see myself as a black person, and because that someone else dislikes me, that someone else is racist towards me and dislikes me because of my skin color, that's going to affect me, how I view myself, and now I want to harm myself because they don't accept me as being a black person. Bro, that is idiotic. That is ridiculous that me not supporting or accepting someone is going to affect them on how they live their life and wanting them to kill themselves or harm themselves because I don't agree with or even support them for who they are or whatever the case may be, whatever they want to identify as. All that goes to show you, if it takes my affirmation for you to live your life, you have a problem. Life should be depending on somebody else affirming it for them. That just goes to show you that whatever you want me to affirm is something that you're truly not. Because if you're truly that person, you don't need nobody to tell you. What the hell?
Or telling somebody that they're not allowed to do something, they shouldn't do something, they're
Nah,
not
I'm gonna
fitting
go kill
into their own
myself.
body, especially experiencing dysphoria
Because you
itself.
telling me something.
It's a mental battle in general. Like,
So to clarify your point, I think you're saying that acceptance is what's leading to. Is that right?
it's a mixture between self-acceptance, outer acceptance. It's a conversation between nature and nurture. Like,
See, here's the problem with that. There's two longitudinal studies alone that I could cite. In Sweden, from 1973 to 2003, they looked at a large number of subjects who had before transition and after transition, and they had worse comorbidities, they had worse mental health issues. Sweden is a very tolerant, liberal, progressive country. A study this year, published in Denmark, 2023, 42-year longitudinal study, and what they found is that the mental health issues did not decline, they actually were augmented. It was worse for individuals who thought that by transitioning they would solve their mental health issues. It actually got worse. It doesn't help, it doesn't solve these issues. It shows it's a contagion. That is the key word.
Let's pause there.
Bro, that goes to show you. Of course it's going to get worse. Of course the mental health is going to get worse. Do you know why? Because not only do they still have to deal with the gender dysphoria that they always had, now they're going to start having physical deformities. They're going to have more health issues because we know when it comes to transitioning that you're going to have to take hormones. You're going to have to do X. You're going to have to do Y. You're going to have to do Z. You're going to have to do a whole bunch of stuff like that. And then your health is at risk because of all these surgeries that you did. So yes, so now you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you are deformed. That's going to make it even worse. Your self-esteem is even going to go down because you have all of these deformities now that you have to do it on top of your dysphoria. So let's go on to the next question.
Gender dysphoria is a mental illness.
It is a break with reality. I'll start at where I've said before. There are two sexes. It's determined not just by external characteristics, but by chromosomes. When somebody dies and is buried, and 400 years later, if they exhume the body and they test those bones, they're going to see that it's an XX or an XY. It's a male or a female. It's a mental issue, and you want to treat it that way. You treat it with counseling, with therapy, reflecting reality, helping the person to be comfortable with the sex that they're born with. Sex.
What do you guys think about that? It's calling it a mental illness.
Yes, I want to respond to your comment about bones and skeletons. I study bioanthropology, and actually they're moving in a direction where they're using terminology like assumed or estimated.
Wow! Why are they moving towards it? Why? Because it's become more political than it has become facts driven.
Because there is large overlap between the general sort of estimations. Also, no one's going to dig up someone's bones unless they've already consented to donating their skeleton somewhere. No one just goes grave robbing for that.
But that's irrelevant.
Let's hear a little bit.
The point
It's
is,
irrelevant to bring it up then.
no, it is relevant to point out that sex is determined at birth and it doesn't change.
But what's the point you're making with the skeleton example?
The point that it doesn't change even over long periods of time.
I'd like to hear a little bit more from
Thank you for your
both
help
of
with
you.
if you're walking around life constantly being told something like what you're supposed to identify as and you feel other than, like, of course, as time goes on, you're going to feel worse and worse about that specific thing.
I don't think there's a reason to transition if you don't have a mental illness. Like, there's something wrong in
That's
your
like
brain.
saying you shouldn't cut your hair because you don't
No.
want long hair.
Wow, that is so not a comparison.
So when
Stay
you
on topic.
I mean when it's the opposite concept of gender or body dysmorphia. So when you look in the mirror and you see what's wrong with, like, you have an uncomfortability with your secondary sex characteristics, and so the treatment is to change that to match with what you want it to be. But I mean, he's right, you can't change your sex. but it's in the brain. You treat the body to help the brain. It's not any different. And honestly, I'm somebody who I don't think we should stigmatize mental illness. That's the whole point is, I have anxiety, PTSD from when I was in the military and everything else. I don't think we should be stigmatizing mental illnesses. And so I think that calling it for what it is just accepting that, and it actually helps with treatment and to what you're treating, because you're treating the brain. You have to go to a therapist. You have to go all of that. So I think it's no issue to call it.
And when you treat the brain, you don't cut the body, though. I mean, if somebody has bulimia or anorexia, you treat the reason why they perceive themselves incorrectly. If somebody has dysmorphia, you don't say, well, just cut off a body part. But this is a complete violation of the Hippocratic Oath.
Gender dysphoria is a mental health condition, and the treatment for this condition is to do a medical transition if that person
No, it's not. That's not the treatment. That's not the treatment.
chooses to have those procedures done. It won't go away with just a simple pill. It's gender dysphoria. It has nothing to do with sex and bones and your DNA.
Do you think children are capable of making that decision?
Let me pose a question. Homosexuality actually used to be considered as a mental illness. Do you think there's any correlation here with what's going on currently with the trans movement?
It has to do with the way you present yourself. And again, I call it sex dysphoria because it's dysphoria of your sex, but it has to do with your secondary sex.
Actually, I would actually go on to say not everyone, but there are, I feel like, certain homosexuals that has a mental illness in themselves as well. Because you really think about it, right? It would be one thing if I'm a regular guy, I don't change anything about myself, but I'm attracted to the opposite sex. But then I'm attracted to the opposite sex. What reason do I have to put on the persona of a female? What reason do I have to put on nails? What reason do I have to put on makeup? What reason do I have to put on lip gloss? Change my voice, change my mannerisms, change the way I walk, change all of these things just to fit into a woman just because I'm attracted to the opposite sex. My personality have nothing to do with who I'm attracted. So I would really feel like if you as a male or a female have to go doing everything in your might to resemble the opposite sex just because you're attracted to the same sex, that does pose some sort of illness. Yes, but I really feel like it depends on the person, not necessarily attraction. So I don't believe that just because you're attracted to the same sex, it automatically means that you have a mental illness. But how you respond to that can dictate some sort of mental illness. That's just my opinion.
Characteristics that you're presenting to society.
Like you said.
In a lot of regards, and even Deborah So wrote this in End of Gender, she actually advocated for this because the same hormone imbalance in the womb that causes more, femininity and homosexuality seems to be very similarly tied to gender dysphoria as well. It's just it's a further step along the way. It's a further condition. And I agree where I use mental illness and mental health condition synonymously, essentially.
So I think what's interesting about this topic is that, we need to consider both statistics as well as
Let's go on to the next question.
pushing gender transitions
The medical community is pushing gender transitions for financial gain.
for financial gain.
So I disagree. I mean, when I started going through my process of transitioning, I didn't feel pushed by any medical professional at all. There were, in fact, quite the opposite. A lot of hurdles and just like bureaucratic red tape sections I had to work through. But it's not something that I think, in my experience, was pushed onto me at least.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. When I started my transition, it took over a year just for me to get to my third doctor's appointment for us to actually talk and evaluate things. And as far as cost goes, my insurance covered everything.
But they are still getting paid. Just the government or somebody else is paying them.
I mean, in comparison to a BBL, yeah.
Well, yeah. So here, but they're still getting paid and they're still getting financial. I actually think there's three different types of doctors. I think that there are people that are going out there and doing it for financial gain. We saw it in Vanderbilt. We saw it in so many other instances where they are doing it. We also see that they are manipulating the system. That's why we have a lot of detransitioners right now, and that's why we're seeing that community grow, is because they're manipulating patients, they're manipulating parents. And so the third is, I don't know if it's ineptitude or if it's incompetence or laziness, but I think that there is a section, there's a group of mental health providers who simply right now, we want to cure everything with a pill. And so we see this not only in the trans community, but we see this in the SSRI community. We see this, everybody's being put onto something, and we're not really treating the root causes. It's one of the reasons why we're seeing a high comorbidity of autism in the community. A lot of people that have autism are getting sucked into this, and they're not being treated for the autism, they're treating for gender dysphoria.
So one thing to consider, and I did research on this, is that apparently based on top or bottom surgeries, it can actually range from around $10,000 to $25,000 from male to female transitions to female to male transitions. And I think what both sides can probably agree on is that America is a for-profit healthcare industry, right? We don't have universal healthcare.
Yeah, and
anything to consider there.
So with the
Socialized medicine.
with the Vanderbilt situation, she actually said because of Obamacare, they have to pay for it. And so they are forcing insurance companies to pay for it. So it became a big moneymaker, was her specific phrase that she said.
I just want to remind everyone that there are international standards of care, and there are many countries out there that have social medicine, and it's not all for profit.
Argentina and Denmark apparently are one of the two countries that has included, I believe, transitioning for minors in their private and public healthcare plans.
I'd like to comment, but I want to give you a chance first.
No, it's kind of hard to draw intentions completely with these kinds of things. I completely agree with you that America is a for-profit country, and so regardless of what trend or what surgery is getting popular, they're going to find a way to make money out of it.
Yeah, America's a
Bro. Anything, first of all, they're not even really asking the question. They're asking, is it being pushed? Are people pushing it for financial gain? Anything in this world, forget this country, anything in this world that has money attached to it, there will be somebody that manipulates it to make more money from it. So of course, there are going to be doctors that just ask you one question, and just based off that one question, like, yeah, you probably have gender dysphoria, you should transition, it's going to be better for you. And then there's probably are doctors that'll be there, and that will be a little bit more aggressive and essentially let you know all of the risks that comes with it and things like that. But yes, bro, the medical community is pushing it for financial gain, ultimately. Because really think about it. Every head that comes into my office and wants to do a top or bottom surgery, whether they pay for it or whether insurance pay for it, let's just say it's $15,000. $15,000. 100 people a year, I will make $1.5 million. Just 100 people a year. And we see how the rates is increasing when it comes to people that are transitioning and people that are identifying as trans, from 0.2% to 20%. Like, come on, bro. Yes, it's a money grab. Next question. Schools should include trans conversion in sex ed.
Conversation in sex ed.
An age-appropriate time, I agree, yes.
What is that age appropriate?
I think by grades 3 or 4, they understand.
Wow.
So what is
Because-
that, like around 8, 9, or?
I don't know anymore. My kids are too old. But that sounds about right. I think 8 or 9 years old is a good time, because gender is a concept
No,
that
it's
is
not.
formed in the mind of a child around the ages of 2, 3, or 4 years old. By the time they're 7 or 8, they understand the permanency of gender. So I think that's a good time to introduce it.
Now, should they be talked about as just as much as, let's say, heterosexual sex, or more in terms of including different historical relevancy, anything like that?
I think it would be great to introduce the difference between gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation, because that is 3 completely different realms. And children can understand the difference between gender expression and gender identity at that age without ever having to talk about sex.
Yeah, I definitely disagree. I think especially what they're proposing right now, a lot of the mainstream sort of education on sex ed is pretty vulgar. You're looking at a couple books. You see a lot of parents going out to city committee meetings, and they're reading books in front of the school committee, and the school has to stop the entire thing because they're reading such vulgar stuff.
If I had to push back on that,
Yeah.
though, kind of we've been going through different personal experiences, and some of these cases we might just be hearing about because they're the most extremist of cases.
Sure.
Do you think that's what's going on, or do you think it's more of a common, prevalent instance that's happening around the country?
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a differentiation between personal experiences and just what's going on in general. And so, of course, you're going to see the more popular cases on social media and stuff. But what it really boils down to, the question isn't really so much what's the content, but is it true? And it's not true. And so, why should kids be learning about it?
I mean,
There we go. Me personally, I do feel like what you are seeing on social media when they go to the committee meetings and things like that, and they're reading from the books, I do feel like that is in the most extreme cases. I don't think that's, every day they're going to a classroom, they're reading all this vulgar material. I don't think that is the case, but like he said, what it boils down to is the truth. And the truth is, no, a man cannot be a woman and a woman cannot be a man. It's really that simple. But the question remains, should it be a conversation? Should trans be a conversation in sex ed? And I'll be like, no. Are we talking about schizophrenia in school with people's mental health issues? So it's like, me personally, I would say a topic like that should probably remain in psychology and not in biology, because psychology is a study of humans, study of the mind. So I would say something like that should be considered in psychology, but not in the topics of like biology or even in sex ed, because I don't even believe sex ed should be considered in school at all. I believe sex ed should be left to the parents, because even when I had sex ed and this was 7th grade, bro, these kids was not paying attention. They were just giving us, it was more so, they wasn't telling us to refrain from sex. They were just more so telling us if you are going to have sex, use protection. And obviously that they should be using protection. But I feel like just saying things like that enables me to be like, okay, yeah, sex is okay, then I should do it. And it shouldn't. We all know the studies. We all know that it'll be way better if a man and a woman wait until marriage to have sex when it comes to STDs, when it comes to pregnancies, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to the high effects you psychologically and everything like that. So yeah, no. Next question.
Minors are capable of making life-altering decisions.
Yeah, absolutely disagree. There's no way. Minors aren't able to make decisions whether to join the military,
get
married, or make tattoos. And so when you're talking about something that's super important, like sex, gender, whatever you want to call it, there's no reason we should be chopping up kids,
drinking,
putting a bunch of hormones in them that are super dangerous that we don't quite know the effects of, and then completely changing their life. That's what I'm like really passionate about, especially just, I think this is like the voice, this is the sentiment among like a lot of Americans is, you can do what you want, but why mess with the kids? And so that's where kind of I'm at. It's like, why mess with the kids?
For the purpose of this discussion, we're defining minors as under 18.
When you say that we don't know the effects of these chemicals and these drugs and all that, it's worth mentioning that generally speaking, all of these medicines that are used were first introduced to be used to treat cis people for various things. Joe Rogan, for example, takes TRT, very similar drug to what trans men take. Estradiol is used to treat menopause sometimes. There are people who take spironolactone, which is taken by trans femmes. People take that same drug to treat blood pressure.
Yeah, but when we're talking about minors specifically, it's an issue because I don't think that they have the cognitive ability to consent to long-term decisions, especially when we start to see, like we can talk about studies, like studies show that 90% will end up desisting by the age of 20. We know what puberty blockers, for example, what they do for precocious puberty, but they've never been studied and they're not FDA approved. They're prescribed off-label for people in key growth years and adolescence. And so we're starting to see, even Marcy Bowers talked about starting somebody.
One thing you'll see is a lot of the people in the blue, they're not answering the question. They ask you, are minors able of making life-altering decisions? And you go about talking about how adults are using what other straight people are using medically, like TRT or stuff like that. That's not the question. We all know minors are not capable of making life-altering decisions. And it's that simple. Like, what are you even talking about? Like, bro, I know for a fact, I want to say 20 to 30 years from now, all the minors that they allowed to transition, all the parents that push the minors to transition, when these people get older and their life continues to get harder and harder and harder because of all the medicine they pump through their bodies and cutting things off or whatever the case may be, they're going to resent their parents for not taking the role of a parent and not saying you're just a child, you don't know anything. So yeah, they're going to resent the parents and be like, yo, why didn't you stop me from doing this? My life is completely hard. I know for a fact the suicide rate is going to jump because, bro, they're going to see just how hard it really gets.
Puberty blockers and then going straight to cross-sex hormones, and every time they're never able to fully achieve orgasm as an adult. Every single person that she's ever had, and she's the president of WPATH. You have to do the studies, you have to figure out, and you have to put a pause button on it. Otherwise, what we're doing is literally experimenting on children.
So one thing that's also
exactly
important to consider too is that currently there are laws, right, when it comes to voting, drinking alcohol, even buying cigarettes at this point, right? I think that is something to consider in terms of this debate.
We don't hold someone's hand when we go in to vote. We go in and vote on our own. When a child who is 16 makes a medical decision to transition, it is made with a team. There's parents, there's psychologists, there's endocrinologists. It's not just one child walking in all by themselves to do it by themselves. We trust children to prepare our food for us at fast food restaurants. We trust children to drive combines on farmland in all 50 states. Why can't we trust a child to tell us that they are not comfortable and that we need to treat them medically with a medical transition?
Because those are practices, those are jobs that aren't going to affect their lives forever. So that's not even, I mean, that comparison
At
just
all.
isn't going to work at all.
You
That's
can
the
have
first
a
thing.
farm accident.
Getting back to this main question, children cannot commit to these life-altering decisions. They don't even know what life they can have. There are so many options that are available to them, and they get cut short. You're making statements about how they have all these adults guiding them into this. That's the whole point. They're guiding them into getting their bodies mutilated when they should be dealing with the mental health issues. Wallace Wong is an unscrupulous medical professional in British Columbia, and he is part of the whole profit regime. They are rushing kids into these procedures. I know this because a father found out that his daughter was being transitioned without knowledge or permission. And when he was telling the public about it, he went to jail. That's what Canada does. So it's not just about big pharma making big money. It's about taking advantage of children that have serious problems. I'm making a personal story here. I hope you're listening. Okay? This is horrendous stuff. These children are confused. They have mental health issues, and they shouldn't be stigmatized. I want to be very clear about that. But the answer isn't to put them under the knife or put chemicals into them that will alter them permanently.
I don't necessarily believe that anybody's pushing anybody to be trans. Like when you're like, leave the kids alone, it's like, look at how you talk about trans people. Who would want to be trans in that sense? Like who would want to be pushing somebody into that lifestyle to be
It is
treated?
happening.
Hey, let's
I'm
let
sorry.
him talk. Let's let him talk.
That I'm passionate about. I'm sorry. How many friends I've had who've been mutilated?
Just because you might not have been able to make that at that age doesn't mean everybody that's 16 or 17 can't make that choice at that age. There's so many 16 and 17-year-olds who have been emancipated.
I don't like how they just keep saying 16 to 17, like minors don't also include 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on. So, bro, let's just go on to the next question.
Minors should be allowed to medically transition.
Absolutely not. That has not changed for me. We're talking about mental health issues, and there are a whole host of problems that children deal with when they're struggling with identity or gender dysphoria. Let's treat those issues. Let's treat those causes. I have mentioned numerous cases of former trans kids who were pushed into it, parents who tried to protect their kids and were punished for doing so. This is a very fraught affair. These are irreversible, damaging procedures, and we have so many detransitioners that are coming out.
I'm gonna just go to the final decision to see what the undecideds choose. But no, minors should not be able to transition at all. Medically, no, they shouldn't be put on no puberty blockers, nothing like that. Because now you got these women that was put on puberty blockers and now their voice deep as hell. You got men that was put on puberty blockers and now their voice squeaky and high as hell. They have no facial hair, and I can't believe our country is at a point where this is actually something that we're being discussed. This is ridiculous. This is atrocious. And for those people that stand up for what's true, for those people that stand up for what's right, you guys don't stand on the fence. Speak up, please. Because if you don't, people that's going to be influencing the next generation.
Undecided.
Let's see the undecided group decides.
Now undecided. What's your final decision? So what's been great about this video is that a lot of you guys have switched different spectrums. So let's start out with what made you go to the liberal side.
I think that you made some really good points about being able to start puberty blockers and socially transition. And like surgeries do not need to happen before 18. They can happen after, but as long as the person can decide to start puberty blockers and decide to socially transition, because what if they don't make it to 25? What if they're not still alive to transition at 25 when they're fully developed? So like, I just don't, and like I seen my cousin that I mentioned, I can't imagine my life without them, and if they're not able to transition.
It goes to show you that the simple fact that she was able to be, I want to say persuaded, I feel like she already had that line of thinking, so she wasn't really undecided. But the simple fact that they can make points and people listen to them goes to show you why more people need to speak up. Because it goes to show you how easily influenced kids can be. And then the question that nobody is answering is, should minors transition? The first thing she goes to say is that, oh, they don't have to transition before they're 18. They can start off on puberty blockers. That's really not the question. And that shouldn't happen at all. They shouldn't go on puberty blockers at all. But that's not the question. The question is, should minors transition?
The effect that will have on their life, and I can't imagine it.
I think for me, what made me come to the conservative side is I definitely think that social transitioning is acceptable. I think of the case of like Angelina Jolie's daughter, who went through a long phase of, I guess, we were not entirely sure if it was gender dysphoria or not, but wanted to present as male, and then came to an age when they did decide that that was something they no longer wanted to do. And so I really respect that opinion, and I am also concerned about that. I really genuinely, we also, if we're not entirely sure like what the medical transition, just be very wary of letting children transition, even if it.
I still lean very much towards the middle, but I think if I had to pick, I lean right now a little bit more on the conservative side. And I think the point you made about how we just don't know really like the detransition rate, transitioning as a process, medical transition, also social transition, and you're absolutely right, in 10 years from now, someone's experience might not be the exact same. I'm not saying that that's the case for everyone. I'm saying that that's probably still not even the majority of people, but I do think it's still a significant amount to take into consideration. There's still a lot that maybe we just don't fully understand, and I think until we get to that point, I'll just err on the side of caution. At least that's how I see it.
Clearly, we all have our own
I like how, even though you can tell he's a little fruity, but still he took logic into it. And like he said, caution. These people, they're just ready to dive straight in the second they see any little thing that's off. And it's a damn shame. It's a damn shame where this country has landed. It's a damn shame. But one thing I will say is there are people speaking up. There are people standing up for us, right? There are people that's not going to be silent on issues like this. And most importantly, they didn't answer the question. And it goes to show you how they're trying to like not really step too hard on it and to say like, yes, a 9-year-old should be able to transition, because they know it's wrong. They know it's wrong. But basically, this was an hour long, and I basically made it half. So now you guys can see the scope of it without having to watch the whole thing an hour. But I'm gonna still leave the link to the video in the description, and you guys can watch it for yourself if you want to see other points that were said that you wasn't able to hear. But thank you guys for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe. See you next time on Anything Everything. Peace.